Ladies and gentlemen, we have a not-so-new World Heavyweight Champion once again, and his name is Gunther. This man has been a champion in the WWE system for over 80% of his time in the WWE, which means that for 80% of his time as a WWE superstar, people have been chasing after whatever championship it is that he's holding. And after just 51 short-lived days as Jey Uso as our World Heavyweight Champion, we're right back to Gunther holding one of the top championships. So now we're once again back in the position where we have to ask ourselves who is eventually going to dethrone Gunther. So in today's video, I've brought you 10 solid, viable options that might dethrone Gunther in the short term, while also maybe some that could dethrone Gunther in the long term. It all really depends on whether Gunther is going to have a short championship run that ends at SummerSlam or another long one that goes all the way through to WrestleMania once again. I think at this point it's becoming a tradition that Gunther just loses a championship run at WrestleMania, it seems. So I'll go through all of the different options that I've come up with. I'll try and make my case for them, but I'll also play devil's advocate and explain why they might not be the best choice. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, ring the bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I know that you're going to fall in love with his YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. And I always forget to plug the merch. Go check out the link in the description and get yourself a Santi Zappa Wrestling is Cool sweater or t-shirt. All right, let's jump into the video. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is, our World Heavyweight Champion Gunther in all of his wonderful Gunner glory. Now, before I go through all of the different options of potential candidates that could dethrone Gunther and become our new World Heavyweight Champion, I think it's important to ask some questions and have a quick discussion as to what we want to get out of this World Heavyweight Championship run from Gunther. Because depending on what kind of championship run we get, I think ultimately changes what kind of candidates we can have as our new potential World Heavyweight Champions. Because if we're just looking at the short term, a championship run that ends, say, at SummerSlam, it really narrows down our options to only a couple of really viable candidates to dethrone Gunther. But if we decide to stretch Gunther's championship run to, say, dare I say, another run all the way through to WrestleMania, well then there, folks, our options are severely expanded. But do you want to sit through another long Gunther championship run? And yes, I say another because I don't think a lot of people have registered yet that Gunther had nearly a 9-month run as World Heavyweight Champion, albeit very lackluster if you ask me. But maybe doing another long championship run could be WWE's do-over, where they actually do it right and where they actually have Gunther go up against mainstays of the main event system. So I pose that question to you. Do you want to see a short championship run that ends at SummerSlam, or do you want to see another one of these long Gunner runs that eventually, like always, as is tradition now, ends at WrestleMania? But now let's start the actual content of the video, which is the different candidates that I've come up with here. Let's talk about Mr. Money in the Bank, Seth Rollins, who's out to save professional wrestling. What's interesting about Seth Rollins specifically being on Monday Night Raw and having the Money in the Bank briefcase is that he can be a threat both in the long term as well as the short term for Gunther. But if I'm being honest with you, ever since Seth Rollins won the Money in the Bank briefcase, I feel like Gunther is not one of those people that's in danger of being cashed in on. Hell, we're already seeing Seth Rollins tease a potential cash-in against John Cena and CM Punk, almost as if he now has tunnel vision and that's the championship that he's going to be going after. That was actually one of the downers of having Gunther win. It just sort of felt like before Gunther won that Seth Rollins was a threat to both shows, to both champions, but now it feels like the tunnel vision is there and that he's only really going to realistically cash in on John Cena now. But that might be a misdirection. He might ultimately cash in on Gunther, and like I've already said, he makes sense both in the short term as well as the long term. I could realistically see Seth cashing in before SummerSlam, at SummerSlam, or on the road to WrestleMania. All of those with Seth Rollins' character and motivations and the fact that he has the Money in the Bank briefcase plot device make them all very viable options and timelines for him. But here's where I ultimately think Seth Rollins lands as Mr. Money in the Bank. I don't think that he's a threat to Gunther. I think if anything, he's a threat to whoever dethrones Gunther. Like instantly and immediately, whoever dethrones Gunther, I could very well see hearing burn it down. Seth Rollins runs down with Braun and Braun security, cashes in on whatever unlucky babyface was the one that was in the ring celebrating at the time. Because cashing in on Gunther himself just doesn't quite feel nefarious enough for this guy that's being built as the top heel of the company. So I think that that doesn't break our hearts enough as wrestling fans. Meanwhile, a plucky underdog babyface that goes through hell style, goes to a war with Gunther, only to, once the smoke settles, he loses again. It's a tale as old as time, right? It happened to Daniel Bryan when he finally conquered John Cena at SummerSlam. We all got to celebrate, only for him to lose the world championship immediately to a Money in the Bank cash-in from a veteran. So ultimately, what I will say is I could very well see Seth Rollins being a world heavyweight champion soon in the long term, but I don't see him as a direct threat specifically to Gunther. But absolutely, I see him as a threat immediately to whoever dethrones Gunther. Now let's talk about main event Jey Uso. And yeah, we have to talk about this guy. I think it would be irresponsible for me to not consider Jey Uso as one of the strongest candidates to dethrone Gunther. One, considering he's already dethroned Gunther before at a main show at WrestleMania. Two, he's just ridiculously popular. And three, it does sort of feel like they're setting him up to have a run at SummerSlam to dethrone Gunther, just based on like the evidence that I'm seeing. But here's the thing, this would just be boring, especially if they go the route of having Jey Uso win the King of the Ring to have a rematch with Gunther at SummerSlam. Because really, break it down, think what that means. It means that we had Jey Uso win the Royal Rumble, have a championship opportunity at the biggest show of the year to dethrone Gunther, only for then, 2 months later, have Jey Uso go into the King of the Ring, win a championship opportunity, go to the second biggest show of the year and dethrone Gunther. We're just doing the same thing again, just with a different label stamped on it. And I've already been there, done that. And as much as I do like Jey Uso, if you're going to have Jey Uso be the one to dethrone Gunther, I hope that they find a totally separate route to get us there. The other reason why I think Jey Uso is a strong candidate is because something inside of me feels like all they did was take the championship off of him, put it on Gunther so that he could go off and have a specialty match against Goldberg for the world championship to make that match feel a lot more special, especially on a July 12th show that might be going really close head to head with All In. And if that's the case, then maybe Gunther isn't the long-term plan and it actually is still Jey Uso, and we're just sort of waiting to get through that program for WWE to give Jey Uso the title back. That's very possible, like genuinely a strong possibility that that is the business process that WWE is thinking about at the moment, that we're just sort of waiting for the title to go back on Jey Uso. Because Jey Uso's championship run never really got going. They had 51 days, he had a couple of matches, but there was still a lot left on the table, a lot that was just not explored enough, and maybe WWE's intentions is to go back to that, to explore those options, to see what it looks like to have Jey Uso win a world championship in an ecosystem where Seth Rollins is running around with the briefcase, because we didn't get to see that either. As much as I don't love this, I have to consider him one of the strongest candidates to just win back the World Heavyweight Championship as early as SummerSlam. I will say, when it comes to short-term versus long-term, I think that if Gunther holds for a long time, I don't think that Jey Uso's the guy. I feel like if the intention is to have Gunther drop early as SummerSlam, then Jey Uso might be literally the top guy on that list. Another really strong candidate for a short-term and maybe even long-term play for Gunther might be Sami Zayn. And one of the reasons why he works as both a short-term and long-term solution is because of WWE's geographical locations for some of the biggest shows of the year that give you a #1 contendership opportunity. I'm talking about Saudi Arabia having both the King of the Ring and the Royal Rumble, both matches that if you win the King of the Ring tournament, if you win the Royal Rumble, you get a championship opportunity. And in both of those shows, Sami Zayn has to be considered a strong favorite to come out on top to get that world championship opportunity, and it could genuinely be as early as winning the King of the Ring. If Sami Zayn wins the King of the Ring, he's going to win against Gunther. He is going to dethrone Gunther at SummerSlam because of the history that he already has with Gunther, the fact that this is a guy that's been working forever for his championship. But if Sami Zayn is the one to dethrone Gunther in the short term, I promise you that's where our hearts get shattered, and that's where Seth Rollins cashes in. This goes back to what I was saying, that I don't think Seth is a threat to Gunther. I think Seth is a threat to whoever immediately beats Gunther. But let's say he doesn't win the King of the Ring tournament, and let's say that Gunther holds past SummerSlam. All of a sudden, I'm right back to having Sami Zayn at the very top of the list, because I would imagine that Sami Zayn is once again a favorite to get a championship opportunity by winning the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia and dethroning, again, as is tradition, at WrestleMania for the World Championship. So yeah, Sami Zayn, based on all of the things that I'm seeing, is near the top of the list and works depending on contextual situations as both a long-term and short-term play as someone to dethrone Gunther. I'm sorry, I have to to include this. It wouldn't be an actual fair video if I didn't include Goldberg in this list. We already know that WWE is planning to do Goldberg versus Gunther, likely at Saturday night's main event. And when Gunther won that World Heavyweight Championship, we immediately knew that one of the reasons why was to have a World Championship match with Goldberg as his retirement match. And they'd already teased this with Goldberg and Gunther having a moment at Bad Blood in Atlanta the previous year, and Saturday night's main event is also going to be in Atlanta, which is where Goldberg is from. Now, WWE hasn't, as of the making of this video, made this match official. Goldberg hasn't officially returned to the WWE, but I think everyone knows that at this moment, it's imminent that we're going to hear Goldberg's music during a Gunther promo. The other thing that we don't officially know is if that match at Saturday night's main event is actually going to be Goldberg's retirement match, because if it's not his retirement match, then I actually think that World Heavyweight Championship is in danger. If it is his retirement match, I don't think that WWE is going to allow Goldberg, a WCW guy, to retire with a World Championship. I just don't see them doing that. But if it's not his retirement match, I'm sorry, but I genuinely see WWE making the bizarre decision of putting the World Championship on Goldberg to just lose it at SummerSlam to somebody else. Or maybe Goldberg wins and then gets instantly cashed in on by Seth Rollins, and Seth Rollins gets to save wrestling because he made sure that Goldberg didn't get to hold a championship. I don't know. There's different things that you can do here, but I think that the most obvious thing that they're going to do is Gunther versus Goldberg. And I understand that we're in a different time period, that 2025 is not 2019, that it's not 2020, but I'm sorry. Anytime that I see Goldberg near a World Heavyweight Championship, I have to assume that it's at least a possibility that he's going to win the damn thing. In the last 10 years, he's won World Championships that nobody wanted him to win. He had no business of winning. So if you think that it's not on the table at all, I'm sorry, I think that you're just being purposely ignorant. And I get it, ignorance is bliss. It's nice to not think about these horrible things, but welcome to the real world. Goldberg could be your World Heavyweight Champion this summer. That being said, I think that Goldberg is only a short-term play. If it doesn't happen between now and SummerSlam, I don't see Goldberg defeating Gunther in the long term beyond SummerSlam. I think the only realistic place that Goldberg could actually dethrone Gunther is Saturday night's main event, and probably just to drop it 3 weeks later at SummerSlam. I know that that isn't WWE's MO anymore to just bounce world championships that quickly anymore, but then again, Jey Uso just went and had a 51-day reign, so maybe they're gonna go back to that era where they would have world championship runs that would literally only last one PLE cycle. I think that we've become accustomed to these year-long reigns or 9-month reigns, but there was a time period where it was totally normal to hold a world championship for 3 weeks. And if Goldberg does dethrone Gunther at Saturday night's main event, I can't see WWE and TKO assuming that Goldberg is going to be viable with the fans or physically viable, because he's an old dude that could get injured in the middle of his championship run. And the last thing that you want is for Goldberg to be your world champion and not lose it, instead vacate the thing. But yeah, I'm sorry to ruin your day. You have to consider Goldberg as a possibility. Let's get into some fun ones. Let's talk about Ilia Dragunov. So a lot of us were speculating that Ilia Dragunov might be the mystery guy in the King of the Ring tournament. Unfortunately, WWE went with quite literally the most unimaginative, boring option possible and just have it be Jey Uso. But there was a genuine excitement amongst wrestling fans at the possibility of Ilia Dragunov returning back from injury several months ahead of schedule, because many reports have him coming back around September to win the King of the Ring and then set us up for one of the mystical, magical matches that main roster fans have yet to actually get to see, but that the super hardcore know would bang: Gunther versus Ilia Dragunov. If you're maybe a newer wrestling fan, or maybe you're a fan of WWE that's only been watching over the last couple of years, I would highly recommend for you to go back and watch Walter, who is now Gunther, versus Ilia Dragunov in their set of matches for the NXT UK Championship. It is some of the best professional wrestling matches that WWE has ever produced, and I promise you, and anyone that knows will vouch for me, I am not exaggerating. So that means that there is a subset of the hardcore hardcore fans that know that how good that match would be, and we just want to see what it would look like in 2025 with WWE's main roster production. And we want the more casual people to get to see the graps that is Ilia versus Gunther, because we just know that it would blow your minds. But now that Ilia Dragunov is not in the King of the Ring tournament, I think it's a safe bet to say that he's probably coming back at the timeline that was initially reported, which was after SummerSlam. And if that's the case, the only way that you can really consider Ilia Dragunov as a threat to Gunther is if you're in the camp that Gunther is going to have a long, fruitful championship reign that goes probably until WrestleMania. There's also a lot up in the air. Like, what kind of status is Ilia Dragunov going to have within the hierarchy of the main roster when he comes back? Are they actually going to push him towards the main event? Is he just destined for a lifetime in the mid-card? I don't know. But I have to imagine that Triple H knows that in his back pocket, he's got a certified banger and a bona fide stud of a classic of a match in Gunther versus Ilia Dragunov, considering, you know, he was in charge of the NXT system when those matches were happening, and I'm sure he wants to run that back in some capacity. But I can't lie, it is a little bit of a stretch. It is making the assumption that WWE will strap a rocket to Ilia Dragunov, and as awesome as that is, I haven't seen any evidence that WWE wants to do that with Ilia Dragunov, sadly. So I actually have him lower on the list of like realistic options, but he's high on the list of the ones that I actually want. So I would consider overall Ilia Dragunov as a low threat to Gunther, but a high threat depending on where they put him in the card once he returns, and if Gunther is still champion once the dust settles of SummerSlam. Now let's talk about CM Punk. This is honestly a really intriguing option. This would be an option for the long term, and like I'm talking several things need to be long term for this to really be a viable option. One of the things that needs to be a long-term thing that happens for this to be really realistic is, one, Gunther needs to hold beyond SummerSlam, and two, Seth Rollins can't cash in, because we've talked about whoever dethrones Gunther is in danger of getting cashed in on. I think that CM Punk, it has to be like the victim numero uno for Seth Rollins. We obviously know the history between Seth Rollins and CM Punk. If CM Punk were to beat John Cena, Seth Rollins is cashing in. If CM Punk were to beat Gunther, I know that Seth Rollins is cashing in. It's just an inevitability. So if Seth Rollins has already cashed in and Gunther is still world champion, I don't see CM Punk being the one to dethrone Gunther. Gunther versus CM Punk, in my opinion, is also likely a long-term play, with CM Punk not being in the King of the Ring tournament, with CM Punk being busy with John Cena, with CM Punk likely being busy with the likes of Seth Rollins and B&B Security. So this would likely need to be after SummerSlam. But I'm telling you right now, if after SummerSlam, Gunther is still champion, CM Punk is healthy, and Seth Rollins is still holding the Money in the Bank briefcase, I would move CM Punk damn near to the front of the line. And going up against CM Punk is something that not just the World Championship needs, but like a Gunther championship run desperately needs. It's the likes of CM Punk that were missing from Gunther's initial nearly 9-month reign that kind of made it feel like the World Heavyweight Championship just wasn't on the same level at all as the other World Championship, because the big names like the CM Punks of the world were not involved in the picture. But if we're getting the likes of Gunther, Seth Rollins, CM Punk in the conversation, then damn it, that's really going to make Gunther's second championship run feel significantly more special than the lackluster first one. I think here we're getting into a bit more of stretch category. Let's talk about Randy Orton. Part of the reason why I have Randy Orton on this list is something that I already talked about. If we have Gunther going up against these main event stays, I know that one of Gunther's championship defenses was against Randy Orton, and honestly, that's where his championship reign peaked. It didn't get any better beyond that. It got significantly worse. So why not put Randy Orton back into that equation? Why not put Randy Orton back into the main event scene? We already saw him go up against John Cena. I don't think he's a threat to John Cena during his retirement tour anymore, but if you put him in the world of like the Gunther of the world, then I think that Randy Orton is absolutely a viable threat. We obviously have Randy Orton in the King of the Ring finals. Unfortunately, he's on SmackDown, so if he were to win, he actually wouldn't be able to challenge Gunther. But then again, it's Randy Orton. When he challenged Gunther the first time, he wasn't on Raw either. And they're just like, hey, yeah, sure, Randy gets an opportunity. So Randy can do whatever he damn wants. If he wins the King of the Ring and wants another crack at Gunther, then I think from a story point of view, it would make a lot of sense. Don't forget that it was Gunther that defeated Randy Orton, not clean, with his shoulders not on the actual like proper flat mat at the King of the Ring finals last year, and he beat him at Bash in Berlin. Randy Orton, if he were to win the King of the Ring, I wouldn't be surprised if he wants a crack at Gunther to demonstrate that he can beat him. Obviously, there's a lot of fictional red tape that's in the way of doing Randy Orton versus Gunther, like Randy Orton just still being hyper-focused on John Cena, Randy Orton being on SmackDown. These are all things that are like just superficial and aren't actual real barriers, but in storyline and in the world of fiction of WWE, they are barriers. So regardless of whether it's at SummerSlam or beyond SummerSlam, I think that Randy Orton has to be considered one of the lesser realistic options. I want to talk about Braun Breaker as a possibility here. I think that a lot of people don't actually know that Braun Breaker is one of the handful of people that have actually defeated and pinned Gunther. Now, mind you, this was in NXT back when Gunther was still a world beater and unstoppable, but now I think that Gunther is an even more like dangerous threat to the world of the WWE. But one of the guys that WWE is building more and more every single week as a clear cornerstone of the company is Braun Breaker. Braun Breaker, even if he didn't have this existing victory over Gunther, would still be considered a favorite in a match against Gunther, if you ask me. But if you tack on the fact that he's already had Gunther's number before, then I think if they were to do a match between Braun Breaker and Gunther, it would make complete total sense to have Braun Breaker go over. This, however, is a long-term play. This makes no sense for it to happen at SummerSlam. This makes no sense for it to happen before SummerSlam. In fact, I feel like the way that this makes the most sense is if he's World Heavyweight Champion after WrestleMania and it sets up something with Seth Rollins, the leader of his faction, maybe at that year's SummerSlam. Or maybe, can you imagine a crazy, vile world where maybe Braun Breaker wins the Royal Rumble, maybe Braun Breaker dethrones Gunther at WrestleMania, and Seth Rollins cashes in on his own protege at WrestleMania? God damn! That would genuinely make Seth Rollins one of the most twirly mustached villains in the history of the WWE, and I would love it. But all of these things are long-term plays. None of them are short-term. So the only way that this is viable is if Gunther holds beyond SummerSlam and even longer. Like, we need to talk about Gunther being a champion in the early portions of 2026 before I can genuinely say that Braun Breaker is an actual threat here. What about somebody like Dominic Mysterio? Is there a world where a Dominic Mysterio could dethrone a world beater like Gunther? There is, because there was a world where Eddie Guerrero, a guy that was half the size of Brock Lesnar, was able to dethrone the world beater that was Brock Lesnar back in the Ruthless Aggression era. So it's not out of the realm of possibility for WWE to do this type of David versus Goliath, where David actually dethrones Goliath. They've done it before. They've done it a bunch of times before. But I kind of like the idea of Dominic Mysterio because it was his little micro feud on Monday Night Raw with Gunther that started getting Dominic over with the crowd. It went from Dominic not being able to say a word on the mic to hearing dirty, dirty Dom, dirty, dirty Dom chants across the entire world. In fact, I feel like that was the moment where WWE realized, shit, we gotta push this guy to become our new Intercontinental Champion at WrestleMania. It started with his little micro feud with Gunther. And when it comes to like a character storyline, somebody like Dominic Mysterio is like the perfect, awesome foil to somebody like Gunther. Somebody that Gunther would never take seriously. Somebody that Gunther would just toy around, only for Dominic Mysterio to be a genuine, serious threat and pick up the victory. Like, dude, the pop would genuinely be astronomical. Obviously, this is another one that falls in the long-term play. This is not something that's going to happen at all in the short term. I wanted to present it to you because I think it's a really intriguing idea. I didn't want to add Carrie and Cross to this list, but I know that the comments section inevitably will be full of, what about Carrie and Cross? Carrie and Cross is eventually going to get his push. Of course he's going to win the World Heavyweight Championship. Oh, sweet young summer child. I also used to believe in Carrie and Cross getting that world championship push after his awesome, seemingly off-the-cuff promo in that podcast after WrestleMania. And yet here we are, like he's barely getting TV time. If he does get TV time, it's usually a coin toss as to whether it's even on the actual live broadcast or on commercial breaks on Netflix. So I just have to be the one to bring you to the world of the living, to the realists of the planet, which is that WWE clearly has no interest in pushing Carrie and Cross. And if they do, it's not going to be to a World Heavyweight Championship, at least not anytime soon. I don't know how we can consider Carrie and Cross as a threat to become a World Heavyweight Champion here in the short term or long term, when right now most of us are concerned as to whether or not he's even going to be re-signed. So I actually have Carrie and Cross quite literally at 0%. Again, I wasn't going to include him in this video, but because of how much narrative there is right now and so much love and hype for Carrie and Cross, I know that initially there would be a bunch of comments in this video asking why I wouldn't include Carrie and Cross. Well, I just kind of gave you the reasonings as to why. Why you might want to go with a Carrie and Cross? Well, I mean, I guess it'd be like listening to the fans, something that WWE has done before. But again, I just don't see any tangible evidence that says that WWE has any interest in Carrie and Cross's long-term success as a superstar in the main event scene. Here's another long-term play, a Jacob Fatu. The only way that I see this making sense is once Jacob Fatu is over and done with his feud with Solo Sikoa. If Jacob Fatu wins the Royal Rumble in Saudi Arabia, which I think we need to consider him one of probably the top 5 favorites to win this Royal Rumble, just considering how over he is. I'm sure he's moving merch like crazy, and just how overall good he is in the ring as well, and in the character that he plays. He has to be considered one of the favorites for this upcoming Royal Rumble. If Gunther is still holding, if Jacob Fatu is in that Royal Rumble, I don't think it takes a lot to connect those dots to just run Gunther versus Jacob Fatu at WrestleMania. I think that's a match that a lot of people would love to see. I think it's an inevitability. It's a matter of when, not if, Jacob Fatu wins a world championship in the WWE. So if we're that certain that eventually Jacob Fatu is going to win a world championship, if further down the line Gunther is that world champion, Jacob Fatu is a very strong candidate to dethrone him. Obviously, in the short term, I have him at like 0%, like just no chance that he's going to be the one to dethrone Gunther. So this is one where it entirely hinges on the fact of whether or not WWE goes with a long-term run for Gunther here as World Heavyweight Champion. And the last one is the one that will actually dethrone Gunther. It's going to be Mr. Iguana. All right, folks, thank you so very much for watching today's video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Leave me your comments down below with your thoughts. I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care. Goodbye. Get out of here.